On Friday, a federal judge issued a restraining order blocking President Trump from placing more than 2,000 employees of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, on leave. The employees were to be placed on leave as part of an effort to dismantle the agency by Trump and his chief crony, Elon Musk. Or should that be the other way around? Earlier today, USAID staffers who work in Washington, D.C. showed up at the agency's headquarters but were turned away by security, and apparently the judge's order merely stopped them from being put on leave and also mandated that they be given restored access to their work email accounts. It didn't say anything about letting them back into their offices, so technically, by continuing to bar them from the building, the Trump administration is not violating this court order. Not that I think this administration really cares about respecting court orders that it disagrees with. The question since this effort to destroy USAID abruptly began a little over a week ago has been why? Trump, Musk, and Republicans in general have been very open about their ambitions to slash the federal budget and the federal workforce, but why has so much of their ire fallen on USAID? Why shut down this agency? Why shut it down so soon? Why shut it down in such a reckless manner? Why are they doing this? The answer from Trump and Musk has been that USAID is a criminal organization, it's corrupt, it's run by radical leftists, it's a money laundering operation, to which most of us have responded, no, seriously, why are you doing this? Because those accusations don't really hold water. All that talk about a criminal organization and money laundering has been just that, talk with no evidence to back it up. Last week, the White House released a fact sheet. I'll pause while you decide how you want to react to the world-breaking absurdity of the Trump White House releasing a document called a fact sheet. You can laugh, you can cry, you can throw up. There are endless possibilities, and it's up to you which one to choose. Anyway, the White House released a fact sheet titled, "At USAID, Waste and Abuse Runs Deep." The introduction reads, "For decades, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has been unaccountable to taxpayers as it funnels massive sums of money to the ridiculous and, in many cases, malicious pet projects of entrenched bureaucrats with next to no oversight." I just want to pause again to note the irony, I almost said delicious irony, but it's not. It's a bitter irony of the Trump White House and specifically Elon Musk's fictional government agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, being in charge of shutting down USAID and putting Elon's various lackeys in charge of the Treasury Department and the Office of Management and Budget and all the other things that have been happening with actually no oversight and no accountability. But these same people are accusing USAID of operating with no accountability and no oversight, and that's not true. USAID has a budget appropriated to it by Congress. It has a mandate that is defined and enforced and overseen by Congress. It's not unaccountable. It's not operating in the shadows. And while I'm sure that, like all other government agencies and all other government projects, it is not perfect and it's not free from wasteful or questionable spending, this idea that it's some rogue agency is an absurd charge. An absurd charge that the rest of the fact sheet does nothing to substantiate. The rest of the fact sheet consists of a list of 12 examples of the supposed waste and abuse of USAID things like funding for DEI programs in Serbia, funding a so-called DEI musical in Ireland, funding a transgender opera in Colombia, and a transgender comic book in Peru. As you might expect, the list is full of racist, queer-phobic hysteria. But one thing that the list is not as full of as you might expect is examples of stuff USAID actually paid for. According to separate fact checks by factcheck.org and the Washington Post, of these 12 examples of USAID waste and abuse, 4 out of 12 were not funded by USAID at all. The first one, the DEI programs for Serbian workspaces one, that one was actually founded by USAID, and it's the only one of the 12 examples listed that both fact checkers determined to be accurate. The White House fact sheet describes this program to, quote, advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities, as though it's self-evidently a waste of money. It doesn't bother to explain why we should be upset that the government is spending money on this. It's DEI. It's automatically bad, I guess. Here's what that program actually does, as described by Glenn Kessler in the Washington Post fact check. Quote, USAID provided $1.5 million to a group called Grupa Izađi, which focuses on creating opportunities for young LGBTQ people. Under the terms of the 3-year grant, USAID delivers money after certain milestones have been met. For many years, USAID has tried to improve civil society in Serbia as interest groups could advocate with the government on reforms. LGBTQ people faced discrimination, so one area of focus was ensuring acceptance of Belgrade Pride, an annual parade that previously was canceled after threats of violence. The 2024 parade was peaceful, and the government is discussing legislation on same-sex partnerships. Yeah, what an outrage that the United States had a hand in something like that, right? The other 11 examples of waste and abuse by USAID listed by the White House to justify killing the agency were either not funded by USAID at all or were misleadingly described. The DEI musical, by the way, not a musical, a music concert put on at the U.S. Embassy in Dublin, funded by the State Department, not USAID. The transgender opera, funded by the State Department. The transgender comic book, which apparently has nothing to do with trans issues and doesn't even feature a single trans character. Apparently, one issue of the comic features a gay character who was apparently mistaken or assumed to be trans by the Trump administration. Fact sheet. That was funded by the U.S. Embassy in Peru. USAID had nothing to do with that. And you've got to ask yourself, if USAID were really as corrupt and criminal as Trump and Musk and their allies insist that it is, why is this the best that they could come up with? 12 examples, 11 of which are false in one way or another, and the only accurate one is the sort of thing only a bigot would object to. But even if all 12 examples were accurate, and even if you accepted that they were all legitimate examples of fraud and abuse, even if you give the Trump White House all of the alleged facts on their fact sheet, the total amount of money spent on these programs, according to this fact sheet by the White House, is a little over $12 million. Now, to be fair, that is ignoring many of the other vague figures that are quoted on the fact sheet. All of the ones that have specific dollar amounts attached to them, if you add it all up, it's about $12.1 million. There are some other items on the fact sheet where they say such and such program cost hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of dollars, and they don't cite a specific dollar amount. So I'm ignoring those, because if you have a specific number, use it, or else shut the fuck up. $12 million. That's the amount of money we're talking about on this fact sheet. And $12 million is a lot of money to you and me, presumably. If $12 million isn't a lot of money to you and you're a fan of mine, let's talk. But $12 million. The total amount of money spent by USAID is about $40 billion annually. And the total amount of money spent by the entire U.S. federal government is about $6 trillion annually. So the waste and abuse that was important enough to mention in the fact sheet to justify this action, to demand the immediate nuking of USAID, amounts to a drop in a bucket in a warehouse full of buckets. $12 million out of $40 billion out of $6 trillion. It, like so much else about Donald Trump and his presidential administration, doesn't pass the bullshit test. Which brings us back to the original question. Why are they doing this? And the truth is, I don't know. But I do have a guess. This is from Newsweek by Theo Berman from February 6. Headline, Alleged USAID probe into Starlink raises Elon Musk conflict concerns. Reading from the article now, quote, USAID was investigating its relationship with Starlink just months before tech billionaire Elon Musk attempted to shut the agency down, according to reports. The freezes and cuts to the Foreign Aid Department, spearheaded by Musk as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, raise questions of a potential conflict of interest, as Musk is the owner of Starlink, a subsidiary of his company, SpaceX. From a bit further down in the article, during a hearing at the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Oversight and Accountability in September, USAID Inspector General Paul K. Martin told Congress that the agency was examining its relationship with Starlink, one of Musk's most prominent tech ventures. In 2022, USAID and Starlink collaborated to provide 5,000 Starlink terminals to Ukraine to give the country fighting Russian invasion access to Musk's advanced internet system, operated through SpaceX, as reported by The Lever. In addition to another ongoing audit on direct budget support, we are examining USAID's energy security project. USAID's oversight of Starlink satellite terminals provided to the Ukrainian government, and USAID's efforts to protect against sexual exploitation and abuse in Ukraine, Martin told Congress. When completed, we look forward to sharing the findings of these reports with the subcommittee. However, one of Musk's first moves as DOGE chief has been to dismantle USAID, convincing the Trump administration that the agency is a waste of federal spending and not fit for purpose. This raises a potential conflict of interest, as Musk's company was under investigation by USAID shortly before he began calling for the shutdown. Starlink's activity in Eastern Europe has been criticized, with many Russian operatives claiming to have access to Starlink, despite Musk's assurances that only Ukraine was using the service. Elon Musk is supposedly on a crusade to end wasteful government spending, but his own companies, especially SpaceX, would not exist without government contracts. Do you think his crusade to increase government efficiency is going to wind up costing his companies any money? Somehow I doubt it. Conservatives have been campaigning on cutting government spending and shrinking the size of government for as long as I have been alive. Government is too big, they say. We've got to shrink it down small enough to drown in a bathtub. The libertarians love saying that. They've turned what might have been, at some point, a reasonable interest in making sure the public's money is being spent in the best way possible into a moral crusade often justifying themselves by invoking the anti-government rhetoric of their patron saint, Ronald Reagan. And you know what? I just decided I'm going to step away from the YouTube thing for a while, and I'm going to go back to school. Yeah, I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to study theoretical physics and quantum mechanics, and when I'm all learned up, I'm going to build a time machine, and I'm going to use that time machine to send all these Republicans walking around with hard-ons for small government back in time 40 years so they can all fuck Ronald Reagan and get it out of their systems so the rest of us can have some peace. But anyway, conservatives have been wanting to shrink the government since forever, but this act of arson that Elon Musk is committing against USAID is taking that desire for small government and cutting government spending and all of that to a whole other level. Do I know for a fact that it's because USAID was investigating Starlink's operations in Ukraine and Elon is trying to cover up the fact that he was doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing, something to aid Russia, maybe? No. I don't know that, and neither do you. But if it turns out that is the reason, it wouldn't surprise me. Because, as we've said many times before, with these people, every accusation is a confession. And when you look at all the things Elon Musk and Donald Trump have accused USAID of being, wasteful, abusive, corrupt, criminal, evil, it fits just perfectly, doesn't it?